New Guinea. The very name conjures up images of dark and dangerous rituals, and a people still living in the Stone Age. Join Jim Burrows and explorer Hervé de Maigret as they journey along the remote south coast of this island, the second largest in the world. A region so celebrated for its ferocity that it remained virtually untouched and unexplored by the West until the 20th century. A land where reverence and fear of ancestors has compelled men into unending cycles of war and retribution since the dawn of time.
When the island of New Guinea was discovered in the 16th century, it lost no time earning its fearsome reputation. A number of maritime explorers stopped here, including Captain Cook, but they beat a hasty retreat, usually beneath a shower of spears and arrows. The Dutch took control of the island at the turn of the century and began a concentrated effort to explore the land. They launched 144 expeditions over the next 60 years, until Indonesia claimed the island in 1963. Nevertheless, when Hervé de Maigret first arrived here in 1959, precious little of this island had been seen by the West. The film made of that first expedition, The Sky Above, the Mud Below, depicted a primitive world of cannibals and headhunters. Now, more than 35 years later, de Maigret returns to learn about the spiritual beliefs of these people before they are swallowed up by the modern world.
When I came back out of the army in 1959, I was very much interested because it was the only white spot on the map, the only unexplored territories on the Earth, really. This time, I just wanted to see how New Guinea was, how much it had changed, what the Indonesian had done to the country. And actually, I was very pleasantly surprised, I must say. To me, in New Guinea, is that you have the past, you have a whole slice of history still alive.
The flight by light plane from the capital, Jayapura, in the north, to the Asmat region on the south coast takes about 4 hours, across some of the wildest jungle on Earth. As we flew over this land of endless mangrove swamps, winding rivers, and occasional thatched roofs, I could not help thinking about the combat pilots in World War II who were forced to crash land out here. One can only speculate on their fate. We were one of few planes that land at this tiny isolated airfield near Agats.
Some of these trips are very difficult to negotiate. The Agats airfield is a dirt field, dirt strip. It is quite bumpy. It's always bumpy with a small plane, but it's flat.
From the airfield, it was another hour by boat to reach the actual village of Agats, the capital of the province.
The coast is very inhospitable. The coast is mostly swamps and mangroves.
The town of Agats, if one can actually call it that, appeared before us literally on the river.
Asmat society went from the Stone Age to the modern society in a very short time.
It was startling to see a town of 20,000 constructed entirely on wood stilts and platforms. In Asmat, as we were to learn, there is no hard earth or stone of any kind, only water and mud, a reality that one must come to grips with immediately.
Now that much has changed externally in Asmat country since we left, more specifically in villages. Agats, the capital, of course, has changed a great deal. It was just a couple of villages at a time, 500 or 1,000 people. But now it's 15 to 20,000 towns. That's quite big.
For us, the boardwalks of Agats displayed little influence of the modern world. But for Hervé, changes were evident everywhere, partially the work of the Catholic Crozier missionaries.
Father Virgil is a Crozier father, and he's been in New Guinea for 23 years.
I would say the predominant element that I see among the Asmat is the respect for, the veneration of the ancestors. It's coming at you at many different places.
This veneration was nowhere more visible than at the Asmat Art Museum in Agats.
In 1963, when the Indonesian destroyed all the artworks, the Crozier fathers started collecting beautiful pieces. They got the funding from the Rockefeller family to build that museum, and that was done in memory of Michael Rockefeller.
Michael Rockefeller's unfortunate fate was, of course, to make a lasting impression on both New Guinea and Western perception of the island. This museum, however, is a testament to his passion for the art and the people.
Here you have various types of masks coming from different tribes, and it's a way of bringing the spirits back on Earth, and they really believe that the spirits are coming back.
Among the intriguing artworks in the museum are two spirit carvings.
Bishop Saweda brought the two carvings in 1993 because he had a dream, and that dream first he went to Safan, and you can see that on the first carving. There is one man climbing up to south towards Safan. The Safan is heaven. In the other carving, you see a whole lot of people. Well, in the dream, he saw that he was going to Safan, and once in Safan, he said, I can't stay here all by myself. I have to come down and tell the other people that there really is a Safan. So he went down, and in the dream, then he brought all his people to Safan. The snake is the power of the unconscious, the power of the world, the power of nature. Interesting things in Asmat country that men are afraid of snakes, and women are not. So very often women joke and catch a snake and run after the man with the snakes. The small canoe is an initiation canoe. It's called a spirit canoe. It impersonates various types of spirits.
As we would soon find out, the spirits are everywhere in Asmat life. Day 2. We set out from Agats in our own canoes, powered with outboard engines, to retrace Hervé's earlier journey into the heart of Asmat.
Since my first expedition, I participated to some expeditions. The second time in New Guinea in 69, 70. In 1966, I participated in a film in Mato Grosso in Brazil.
Hervé's experience in dealing with primitive peoples around the world put our crew at ease as we began the long journey along the Asmat coast. Each mile traveled seemed to take us further and further back into time, back into the Stone Age past. Our first destination would be the rival villages of Omandasep and Achtinep, a region that not so long ago was described simply as unexplored. This was an area where Hervé had spent considerable time in 1962. It was also the area where Michael Rockefeller would mysteriously disappear a year later. Along the way, Hervé pointed out the sites to his wife Pamela, an explorer in her own right who had traveled extensively on the Amazon. After 2 days, we finally reached Omandasep.
In 1959, the next village, Ochinac, that we visited, was at war with the Omandasep. And they were continual raid on one village, on the other. Actually, Omandasep had the upper hand on Ochinac.
This was actually Hervé's first time in the village of Omandasep. The two villages, we were told, had been living in relative harmony for the last 20 years, the result of efforts by Father Virgil and the Crozier missionaries. We set up camp in one of the larger thatched huts. The villagers watched our actions somewhat suspiciously. Hervé kept a journal along the way. In it, he reflected on life in Asmat country.
Daily life is very simple. In the morning, men and women go fishing or go to their garden, and then they come back around noon. The men go to the long house and carve or play the drums or prepare for coming ceremonies, and the women are in their house doing housewives' chores.
Hervé explained that when he had first come to the region, few of the men and women had worn clothing in the Western sense. Now only children went about naked.
The Indonesian administration wants the children to go to school, and that's a problem. Because the Asmats are nomadic people. They have to go and get food in the jungle, and if they have to send their children to school, they have to stay in a village.
Aside from that, daily life seemed to proceed much as it always had, with the women fishing and gathering food, and the children playing. Father Virgil told us that traditionally the longhouse was the communal home of the men of the village.
It isn't 100% that, because during some of the feasts, the women are also allowed to do dancing and drumming in those houses. And also through the whole day, the women may come there and bring a baked sago or fish to their husbands who are in that house. But usually in the evening, most of the family men go back to their family houses. Some of the unmarried men, as well as very, very old, perhaps widowers, would also be staying there to tend to the fires.
Day 5. we set out into the jungle with a group of villagers to harvest a sago tree. The trip was anything but simple.
Hiking through the mud is no problem for the local people. They're barefoot. But for us with shoes, it's a different story. It's quite unpleasant and it's hard. It's tiring.
To make our journey a bit easier, the men cut down palm branches and laid them along the path for us to walk on. Unfortunately, it didn't help much.
Though the sago trees are in the jungle and grow wild, they belong to specific clan, families, and people. So people go in the jungle and cut their tree, the owner cut the trees. Sago meal, which is a meal made from the heart of a palm tree, from the sago palm tree, is the basic staple of their diet. Without sago, they starve. The women attack the trunk, part of the trunk, and pound the inside of the tree to a pulp. And then they take the sago and put it in the mush, and they put it in a sieve made from sago leaves and small branches, in order to screen the woody material, the fiber. And the sago meal proper is collected at the bottom of the device and let there to settle for a few hours and until it makes a cake. And then the women carry that cake to the home in the canoe.
The value of sharing is most mentioned by Asmat people, and a good or a bad person is often measured by how well he or she shares. So when the people come back from the jungle with sago, they know they have to give a ball of sago to whom? To the in-laws, and the in-law relationship there is one of the closest relationships.
The Asmat concept of sharing was never more clearly demonstrated than at Sunday Mass at the Amandasep Chapel. The villagers came dressed up in all their traditional body paint and finery. In absence of the priest, the service itself was conducted by a lay cleric. And though it did include a great deal of Catholic liturgy, it looked to us much more like an Asmat ritual.
When I was preparing people for baptism of the little children, I would ask the people, the parents, why do you want to baptize these children? Oh, well, so they could become a follower of Jesus. Well, why be a follower of Jesus? And then there was kind of a silence. And finally I says, well, what if you just burnt the churches, forgot the Bible or burnt the Bible up and didn't read it anymore and didn't go to church anymore? Wouldn't that be better? I mean, you'd be free of all this stuff. And then an answer came and he says, no, if we did that, we would be certain to be going back to war, and then we would be scared again of one another. We wouldn't be able to travel from village to village.
The war paint in church that Sunday was indeed a testimony to the style of the Crozier Fathers. The success of their efforts had clearly been a direct result of a willingness to welcome the Asmat traditions into the process. And as tradition dictates here, it was an invitation to the ancestors to participate as well. Ancestors who had lived with the system of cannibal and headhunting justice that prevailed before the arrival of the Croziers and Hervé. When it came time for the offerings, Hervé stepped forward along with the villagers to express his thanks to both the ancestors and to the Christian God.
The Khrushchev's father saw that there was no hope of converting Asmats if their culture was not included in the ritual of the church. And that's why now they're including their drumming and dancing and carvings in the life of the church. I think on one side the missionaries are fewer and fewer, and probably in 4 or 5 years they won't be replaced. And on the other side, I think there's pressure by the local clergy, by the Indonesian clergy, to replace the Western. In a way, the Asmats are a lot more spiritual than we are. We spend a great deal of our time and efforts on acquiring material goods. They don't. They spend their time with their ancestors.
The ancestors are never far from mind. They remain a tangible presence in everyday life and are symbolized in large, elaborately carved beach poles.
The basic meaning that I've heard from the people is that they are representations of people who have died either in war or people who have died a natural death also, men and or women. And in the Beach Feast, these people are commemorated. One explanation is so that their spirits are able to go to the heaven of Asmat, which is called Safan.
In each Asmat village, there is usually one carver, and I think it comes from family, from father to son. It's inherited, and the carver has 2 or 3 apprentices usually. Carving was traditionally the way of communicating and keeping the spirits around.
The various figures, plus the portion of the beach pole that sticks out, are each given a name of a person who has been killed in battle years ago, or someone who has died a death either long ago or recently.
Perhaps the heart of any culture is how it views illness and death. For the Asmat, such things are regulated by the ancestors. Ancestors may permit illness to happen, perhaps to correct some wrongdoing in the village, though the immediate cause of the affliction is almost always considered the result of a curse. Cursing is a form of black magic, conjuring up ancestors or natural forces in order to inflict ill upon someone.
Asmat, as all people in New Guinea, believe that sickness as death results from a curse, from a hex.
Traditional methods of healing have always included such natural substances as leaves and flowers known to have medicinal effect. This patient seems to have malaria, though he is treated with the same leaves used to treat all illnesses.
Also, they use a stone because the stone incarnates the spirit, the power of the ancestor.
The knowledge and power to use these substances effectively has always resided with the shamans, who devote their lives to healing and to removing curses.
One of the missionaries sent various plants, barks, roots to be examined in Java and found that about 80% of them actually had healing substances in them.
The problem is to find who put the curse on the person, and that they find out in dreams or when the sick person is in delirium. Sometimes she or he utters a name, and that's the name of the suspected malefactor, the criminal or culprit. The healer has to get the help of that person, otherwise he cannot cure the person. The parents or the family of the sick person has to pay compensation to the family of the suspected hexer or curser. I believe that what is important really is the laying of hands. That's what brings the power, the curing power to the patient.
I would say that much of the healing has to do with psychic powers, especially considering the fact that the Asmat have such a sharp fantasy and imagination, making it possible for ritual, any ritual action, to have much more effect, much more healing effect on the person. They still do live in much more fear than what I think we can fathom as Westerners. Actually, at one point we were going to dealers and learn more about actual hygiene and health matters, which probably would supplement what they were already doing. We believe some of the things that they are doing are definitely very, very health promoting. Some of the things perhaps couldn't scientifically be supported, but nonetheless they prompt people to come to good health.
There is great beauty here in the land of the cannibal, and a seduction, perhaps dangerous, that this primitive world holds secrets that might help us all find our way. At certain moments here in Asmat, we all experienced a strange tranquility and peace that we've known in few other places. This serenity, together with a legacy of ritual violence so alien to us that it is the stuff of our nightmares. A profound enigma, perhaps, but real nevertheless. Day 7. We broke camp early in the morning and prepared to leave Amandasep amid vague rumors that the chief was unhappy with us. We had no idea why. With our canoes loaded, we were about to push off from shore when the chief ordered our boats to be tied up again. Joseph, one of our local guides, had apparently promised the chief money, which we thought was for the village church, but the chief had expected would be paid him personally. This was a loss of prestige he could not accept. Hervé talked with Joseph to try to get a sense of how serious the matter was. It was serious. The chief expected to be paid $1 million.
I think it's payoff time, is what I think it is.
Payola.
We're too far in the boondocks for it to be permits. So, you notice how he tied the rope up there?
Very well,
He doesn't want us leaving until something is dealt with. And I think it's probably a financial situation.
In his hut, the chief reconfirmed his demand for the money. When I explained to him the value of $1 million American dollars and how ridiculously impossible this was, he dropped his demand to $1,000, or they would keep Joseph. There was, he said, nothing more to discuss. The money or Joseph. I told the chief that I would raise as much as I could and then return to the others to talk it over.
If you got a 10 on you, or make it look like we're
I get you.
collecting up here, okay?
Okay.
I think I do. You got 10?
I got a 500. And what is he doing?
What you got there? Remember what it was, right?
Tell me what he's doing. He's fee collection.
It's bribe time.
Ransom, not bribe.
One client contributed $100, and the other one didn't contribute anything. And the money was to build a new church common to the. So it was really a loss of prestige, and they got very angry about it.
Must be glad we did it.
Yeah, the reason why is because they weren't consulted. And each village is their own.
There was a lot of shouting. We don't understand what they talk about. And by the time they figured out that Jim was the money bag, so they took Jim. And they say, well, you're not leaving until you give us some money. And I think they want an exorbitant sum of money. And so they negotiated. Probably they would have hesitated to beat us up or to murder us because of the Indonesian. I don't think they would have done so. But I think they would have beaten Joseph seriously and wounded him.
With the ransom money paid, the chief finally gave the word to let us go. Everyone was relieved, especially Joseph. 20 years ago, Joseph, and perhaps even ourselves, might have faced a more grim prospect. Though cannibalism and headhunting were generally reserved for war-related situations, our predicament could have qualified.
Asmats on the coast were both cannibals and headhunters, and not that many tribes were both. I think in the old time there were cannibals all over New Guinea, but only certain tribes were headhunters.
Eating another human being is a means of gaining from that person his own strengths and his own goodness. Revenge is surely one element of it, but not just that, especially if the person was killed and then eaten. You have much more than just revenge going on. Through killing another person to, you might say, balance things out for the one that was killed previously. If I killed your son and ate him, there is a ritual in which I would become your son. So I would replace your son, and I would have the same obligations to you as the son that was killed.
I think there is still cannibalism going on in the hinterland, in the backwoods, because the chief told me they had killed some enemies and eaten them, and he made no bones about it.
Michael Rockefeller, son of the former vice president, lost his life here on the Asmat coast in an incident surrounded by rumors of cannibalism. In fact, for quite some time, the death of Michael Rockefeller remained a mystery to the world at large. The truth would eventually come out, however, only to be further squelched by the Dutch, who were still in charge in 1962. The pieces of the puzzle were finally assembled, largely with the aid of one of the missionaries, Father Van Kessel, who was made privy to the facts by the people of Oxeneb. In his version of the tragedy, Rockefeller was killed and eaten, but not in any act of random violence. As the story goes, the act was in response to an incident in which Dutch soldiers had entered the village of Oxeneb and mistakenly fired upon and killed a number of villagers. When Rockefeller's canoe overturned on that fateful day in 1962, he had the misfortune to encounter Ajam, an Oxeneb chief whose family members had been among the dead. Ajam was compelled by everything sacred in Asmat beliefs and traditions to avenge his loved ones. There was nothing personal about it. Michael Rockefeller was simply a white man, not unlike the Dutch soldiers, who was in the wrong place at the wrong time. But that was then, and this was now. At least on the coast, people did not kill and eat each other anymore. Still, we were glad to be leaving Amandasep and heading back downriver to the sea. From there, we would navigate up another river to the village of Biwarlaut.
To go upriver on the Asmat coast is a very pleasant experience. The water is calm. It's a very lush jungle. You have birds, white birds, cockatoos flying from the trees. And I think each one of us has a desire to go to the jungle. And so you meet your dream.
As we sped across the open sea, we had no idea that word had already been sent to Biwarlaut, advising the villagers of our impending arrival, and that the warriors were heading out to sea to meet us in all their head-hunting regalia. After our recent experience at Amandasep, the sudden appearance of these painted men paddling out to meet us was a bit unsettling. Hervé was calm about the situation, but we felt a little like we imagined Captain Cook must have felt. But then there was no shower of spears and arrows.
But when I saw these people coming down with their feathers and fur hat and horns and shields, it reminded me of what I saw 40 years ago. They are doing this kind of thing now for fun, but you should remember that in the old time, that's the way they were going to raid another village, and they were going to come back with bodies and heads.
As we made our way upriver to the village, we couldn't help but reflect on Hervé's first journey here, when the heads of enemies were openly sought.
The Asmat reputation for ferocity was fully justified. We saw the skulls in the houses, and we heard about a headhunting party which resulted in 100 deaths and probably 3 or 4 heads in July of '59. That was the last big hunting parties in history. Asmat consider that the head is the most important part of the body, and certainly by eating the brains, actually the brains are reserved to the elders. They acquire the wisdom and the strength and the power of the enemy. In the first expedition, the Asmat received us very well. There was one good reason. There was an administration post and there was a missionary, so they had to be nice to us. But in villages outside this area, we could stay 2 or 3 days and then we were unwelcome. This time, they were obviously very happy to see us, to exchange goods and make a little money.
Our actual arrival at the village of Biwar Lao was the stuff of a Joseph Conrad story. Everyone was out to greet us, even the women's percussion ensemble. Hervé stepped onto the shore looking very much like he'd just returned home. We unloaded our gear and were directed to set up our tents on the shore, not far from the longhouses. The chief, an impressive-looking fellow, was there to greet us and to invite Hervé to the men's hut for a special ceremony in his honor.
We went to the village, we went to the man's house, and then there was a symbolic adoption ceremony, which is a way for us to exchange goods and so on. But that's traditional among them. They adopt the missionaries, they adopt the visitors. They have a more elaborate ceremony where they adopt couples from different villages, and that's a way of making peace. This time I was the only adoptee, but that's something they do currently among themselves, among people from different villages.
The ritual face painting and traditional headdress now made Hervé a brother to these Asmat warriors.
These people are extending their hospitality to an incredible degree by trying to take us into their family. Because in Asmat, for a person to be just all alone and not have family is impossible.
The chief of Biwala, as all the chiefs and all people, are quite impressive. He bought his drum after the ceremony. He came with his drum, asked for a high price actually, but obviously I had to buy the drums from him. The drum is something important. You don't sell your drum to anybody because the drum, again, is a place where the spirit resides, the spirit of the ancestors.
I want to thank you, everybody here, for welcoming us and for adopting me and painting me in your colors.
Joseph translated Hervé's acceptance speech and explained how much the honor meant to him. The men seemed pleased.
I was here for a long, long time, 30 years ago. So thank you again.
Then the drumming and chanting began in earnest as Hervé joined the warriors in a dance. There was something joyful and yet somber in this chant that had once celebrated a successful raid and the taking of enemy heads. The next morning we broke camp and loaded our canoes for the journey back to Agats, the long journey from the Stone Age back to the 20th century. We were accompanied once again by the Asmat warriors in their long canoes, in whose carved prows the spirits of the ancestors still reside to protect them from evil.
There is no such thing as absolute good and evil in the way we consider it today, like God and Satan. They believe in good, they believe in love, and they believe that certain things are bad. But they are much more tolerant. They don't believe in absolute evil. What is interesting to me in New Guinea is that you have the past, you have a whole slice of history still alive. And today we do things in religion in particular, and even in social life without really understanding the meaning where they come from. These people still have a great contact with nature, a great relationship with nature, and we've lost that completely in our urban civilization. So it's good to have people who are not influenced by all these things and are still living naturally, and I think we can get our guidance from them.
As we all move forward in a world of ever-shrinking resources, we may well have to look to our distant past for guidance and knowledge of a natural world that is fast slipping from our grasp. Knowledge of leaves and flowers and birds, and perhaps even of ancestral spirits that once walked the same earth. When the island of New Guinea was discovered in the 16th century, it lost no time earning its fearsome reputation. A number of maritime explorers stopped here, including Captain Cook, but they beat a hasty retreat, usually beneath a shower of spears and arrows. The Dutch took control of the island at the turn of the century and began a concentrated effort to explore the land. They launched 144 expeditions over the next 60 years, until Indonesia claimed the island in 1963. Nevertheless, when Hervé de Maigret first arrived here in 1959, precious little of this island had been seen by the West. The film made of that first expedition, The Sky Above, the Mud Below, depicted a primitive world of cannibals and headhunters. Now, more than 35 years later, de Maigret returns to learn about the spiritual beliefs of these people before they are swallowed up by the modern world.
When I came back out of the army in 1959, I was very much interested because it was the only white spot on the map, the only unexplored territories on the Earth, really. This time, I just wanted to see how New Guinea was, how much it had changed, what the Indonesian had done to the country.
New Guinea. The very name conjures up images of dark and dangerous rituals, and a people still living in the Stone Age. Join Jim Burrows and explorer Hervé de Maigret as they journey along the remote south coast of this island, the second largest in the world. A region so celebrated for its ferocity that it remained virtually untouched and unexplored by the West until the 20th century. A land where reverence and fear of ancestors has compelled men into unending cycles of war and retribution since the dawn of time.
If one can actually call it that, appeared before us literally on the river.
Asmat society went from the Stone Age to the modern society in a very short time.
It was startling to see a town of 20,000 constructed entirely on wood stilts and platforms. In Asmat, as we were to learn, there is no hard earth or stone of any kind, only water and mud, a reality that one must come to grips with immediately.
Now that much has changed externally in Asmat country since we left, more specifically in villages. Agats, the capital, of course, has changed a great deal. It was just a couple of villages at a time, 500 or 1,000 people. But now it's 15 to 20,000 towns. That's quite big.
For us, the boardwalks of Agats displayed little influence of the modern world. But for Hervé, changes were evident everywhere, partially the work of the Catholic Crozier missionaries.
Father Virgil is a Crozier father, and he's been in New Guinea for 23 years.
I would say the predominant element that I see among the Asmat is the respect for the veneration of the ancestors. It's coming at you at many different places.
This veneration was nowhere more visible than at the Asmat Art Museum in Agats.
In 1963, when the Indonesian destroyed all the artworks, the Crozier fathers started collecting beautiful pieces. They got funding from the Rockefeller family to build that museum, and that was done in memory of Michael Rockefeller.
Michael Rockefeller's unfortunate fate was, of course, to make a lasting impression on both New Guinea and Western perception of the island. This museum, however, is a testament to his passion for the art and the people.
Here you have various types of masks coming from different tribes, and it's a way of bringing the spirits back on Earth, and they really believe that the spirits are coming back.
Among the intriguing artworks in the museum are two spirit carvings.
Bishop Saweda brought the two carvings in 1993 because he had a dream, and that dream first he went to Safan, and you can see that on the first carving there. And actually I was very pleasantly surprised, I must say. To me, in New Guinea, is that you have the past, you have a whole slice of history still alive.
The flight by light plane from the capital, Jayapura, in the north, to the Asmat region on the south coast takes about 4 hours, across some of the wildest jungle on Earth. As we flew over this land of endless mangrove swamps, winding rivers, and occasional thatched roofs, I could not help thinking about the combat pilots in World War II who were forced to crash land out here. One can only speculate on their fate. We were one of few planes that land at this tiny isolated airfield near Agats.
Some of these trips are very difficult to negotiate. The Agats airfield is a dirt field, dirt strip. It is quite bumpy. It's always bumpy with a small plane, but it's flat.
From the airfield, it was another hour by boat to reach the actual village of Agats, the capital of the province.
The coast is very inhospitable. The coast is mostly swamps and mangroves.
The town of Agats